Hey everyone, and welcome to the Fischer Random World Championship Qualifier. I'm Jon Ludwig Hammer, and I will be hosting today's event. This event is not normal chess. This is a Fischer Random Chess, invented by Bobby Fischer himself. And there are some special rules that apply to this variant. The pieces will start randomly along the first rank. We will not have the same starting position we normally have. Both black and white will have the same placement of the pieces. Other chess rules do apply. There is one special thing though, and that is how castling works. We will be going into that as those special situations occur during the games. But for now, let's take a look at how we got here, where we are today. This is the bracket for this qualifier knockout stage. We started out yesterday with 8 players, and we've narrowed it down to 2. David Navara taking down none other than Daniel Naroditsky in the semi-final. He definitely earned his spot. And Matthias Bluebaum, he actually had to go into a tiebreaker in his semi-final against Alexei Sarana, but with a clutch draw with the black pieces, he managed to go through on the special Armageddon rules that black gets less time, but on the other hand, you make it through with a draw. So our 2 competitors then remaining, David Navara of the Czech Republic and Matthias Bluebaum of Germany. Neighboring countries, but they are not neighborly friendly right now. They are duking it out to win their spot in the live finals of this Fischer Random World Championship. And that final will be held in Reykjavik, Iceland, starting at the end of October. And we will have the reigning world champion, Wesley So, the runner-up back in 2019, Magnus Carlsen, and the home player, Gretarsson, together with a player who already qualified from a similar chess.com qualifier last week. That's Fedoseyev. So that means we've introduced the tournament and what lies ahead. But the format for this final will be different to the semi-final. And the crucial difference is that we're now playing best of 4 games. So that essentially means the first one to score 2.5 points win. However, if it's tied 2-2, we will be using that Armageddon format again, giving black less time, but black then getting the advantage of a draw being good enough to make it through to the championship in Iceland. So we are getting ready for this matchup. The players just about to start their games. I'll invite the chat to make their predictions. I saw someone commenting earlier that this is going to be a really close one, and I have to agree. These are 2 players who are closely rated, who have shown their skill getting into this final. I do think it might even have to use that Armageddon format to decide who's making it through to the next round. Is it invented by Bobby Fischer? Asks Adam, and yes, it is, and that is why it has the Fischer Random name, and that's also why it's such a nice occasion that we're going to have the Fischer Random World Championship finals in Reykjavik, Iceland, which is 50 years after the famous Fischer Spassky match. It's an anniversary for Iceland, and they're hosting this event to celebrate it. Often, on the first move in Fischer Random, we see the players thinking for quite a bit because they need to familiarize themselves with the situation. And here we see from the beginning David Navara playing really quickly, and he's pushing his pawn way up the board. That is a risky strategy, I would think. This pawn being immediately challenged by the black pawn. Navara happy to get a space advantage, being aggressive with his pawns. He's just putting the next guy up to defend. And now the key to these Fischer Random openings and what you want to be looking out for once you have a fresh position is how are the pieces placed. And I'm noticing that both bishops, unusually here in the center of the board, bishops actually don't really enjoy being placed in the center, because what matters is what direction they're pointing towards. And right now, these bishops are pointing out to the edge of the board. And we would rather have them pointing in towards the middle. So figuring out how to best utilize the bishops, that will be a main priority for both players starting out here. Also, I like to check out if there are any pawns in the initial position that's undefended. And here, that is definitely not the case. But there is a pawn that is only defended by the king for both players. So that might be a pawn you want to target early on. David Navara, wow, he's being very aggressive with his pawns, really just getting them out there from the beginning. Bluebaum now needing to decide how he wants to deal with this aggression. I would think the bishop can come out here. But what about this other bishop? It seems to me that the strategy chosen by Navara will allow him to get a bishop very nicely on this b3 square. He might even do a similar thing on the opposite side, moving his pawn forward to get his bishop. Well, basically getting the bishops to the side of the board and then pointing them down towards these very crucial central squares. Whereas Black's bishops, I should say, are struggling to find a good placement. And wow, look at this. Navara once again neglecting development, not getting his pieces into play. Instead, he's just going at it right away, trying to establish his dominance of the board. And look now, he has, I would say, succeeded in the strategy. These pawns taking out some very nice squares that the black pieces want to utilize. For instance, this black knight, it cannot move forward because the white pawn is just completely taking charge on those squares. And also the pawn to f3 next for white, that will be a very favorable pawn structure because it when you get the pawn forward, you will just be taking control over all the squares the black knight would like to utilize. Wow, I think this has been a tremendous success early on for David Navara. He's really seized the initiative with his aggressive pawn play starting out. And for this game, I'm holding him as the favorite. Symphonic Knight asks, "Where's Danya? 5 hours ago, he said he was co-hosting." Well, that could very well be the case that he said it, but 5 hours ago, he should have been sleeping if he wanted to co-host. Because, well, he's not here now, and I'm hoping he gets his beauty sleep at the now that he's already missed out on the start of this exciting final. Hubiston asks, it's also called Chess 960, isn't it? Because there are 960 different combinations. And that is absolutely correct. Fischer Random Chess, also known as Chess 960, because there are 960 different starting positions. And here, David Navara completing that plan we talked about earlier, having these pawns defending each other up the board. Those pawns are doing a great job stopping that black knight. The black bishops miserable still, struggling to find a good placement. The white bishops will find their spots pointing in towards the center pretty soon. I gotta say, I'm really liking Navara's play here, and his aggression with the pawns in the opening has really paid off. Matthias, his thinking pose seems to mostly surround with the hands on the side of his face, and then when a move is made, he gets into more of a pensive, resting your head on the hand on the arm situation. Navara looking surprisingly nervous or concerned with his face muscles, but he has absolutely no reason for that concerned frown. He's really putting his pieces where they belong. And even though breaking through will be a problem, he has both better time and better placed pieces here at the beginning. Bluebaum taking his time now. He's moving his queen to help out the bishop. This queen and bishop are working on the same diagonal now, and that means white is trying to no black, sorry, is trying to prepare bishop to e6 and trying to make a trade of bishops pointing down towards the white one. And that is a good plan for black. Black is very cramped. The white pawns being more advanced on the board is limiting the options for the black pieces. And that means the more pieces you have, the more pieces are struggling to find good locations. So when you're cramped, like Bluebaum is here, you want to make trades so that there's less pieces in bad positions on account of there being less pieces on the board. Navara then maneuvering his knight. He's anticipating the black bishop to be traded off soon. And when that bishop is traded off, the bishop will no longer control the important f5 square, which is why this white knight is already making its way up the board, trying to get to f5. And now the trade has been offered. I'm expecting the trade to be made here, and then Navara coming up with his knight. Navara, well placed pieces, but notice how that the queen side has been completely blocked with the pawns. Neither black's nor white's pawns are able to move further forward. That's kind of a ziplock formation going on there. And that means if Navara wants to win this game, he's probably going to have to make his breakthrough on the opposite side of the board. And Bluebaum then, knowing that fact, he can focus all of his defensive resources on the king side now. And Bluebaum knows he has a bad position, but he probably feels like it's not worse than being able to grovel his way into a draw. Navara now taking his time, realizing that this may be a key moment to keep the advantage going. Very often in the semi and quarterfinals, we saw David Navara having a big time advantage in his games. But here, he is down a full minute, and Bluebaum keeps up the pace, making his move in less than 3 seconds. And Navara, rarely down on time, has to deal with that new situation. And as the moves come in, the eval bar on the left side, which shows some whiteness and some blackness here. Normally, if it's almost exclusively white, it means that white has a massive edge, or conversely, if it's mostly black, it means black is doing much, much better. Here, it's split down 50-50. Indicating that this position is equal, despite white's pawns being slightly more aggressive on the board. So Bluebaum has done an excellent job of neutralizing that early pressure Navara put. Now Bluebaum's turn to ponder the moves, and he can be happy with his position right now. I was concerned at the beginning of this game, but now he's back in it. He's played solidly. He got his pieces into good squares, and he's just sitting here, making sure that white's breakthrough is difficult to achieve. Broads asks in chat, when is the championship? So the winner of this match will qualify to the live event in Reykjavik, Iceland. And that event will be starting on October 25th of this year, featuring Wesley So, the current world champion, also featuring Magnus Carlsen. Of course, that championship you can watch on the chess.com channels. We've had a big continuation from Bluebaum, taking 2 minutes before making this decision. He was looking at these bishops up against each other, and he has chosen to make the trade, because then afterwards he puts his queen up against white's queen and offers the trade there as well. Navara, he says yes to the trades, and then tries to infiltrate with his knight coming up to f5. Also, white seemingly has control of the central file. The two white rooks will be pointing down the board, and they will have control of the only open file on the board.
Indeed. Also, Jan, hi. And
hi.
Hello, everybody. I apologize for the delay. It is weird to be in the commentator's chair after the last couple of days, but you have done a phenomenal job. I've had several people report to me that they have enjoyed your commentary over the past couple of days, and I'm thrilled to be watching the finals with you. Hello, everybody.
So Danya is joining us, and Danya, having competed in this tournament, in this qualifier, do you have like any sage wisdom on what you need to be especially aware of in these Fischer Random games?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that when you're just playing practice Fischer Random games, it's very easy to adjust to the position. when you're sitting in front of a huge crowd, it's a completely different feeling. It's incredibly disorienting to adjust to the position, because you realize what the stakes are, and you realize that if you blunder on move one, everybody's kind of going to start laughing at you. So the process of adjusting to a new position, I think, is a lot more difficult when stuff gets official.
Yeah, that's why at the beginning of this game, I was very surprised that David Navara, on the first move, he made his move almost instantly. Whereas Matthias Bluebaum with the black pieces, he spent 24 seconds on his first move. And like, when you're playing normal chess, that's just ridiculous. But
yeah, that was incredibly disorienting. That was crazy that he was doing that.
Spending 24 seconds or spending no time?
Spending no time at all on move one.
Because you need to get familiar yourself with the position, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's, Eric Hansen was spending, over a minute on move one. I spent about 30, 45 seconds on move one. And, to play instantly is just crazy. And I apologize, I'm adjusting my mic here, so I'll be back with you in a second.
In the meantime, David Navara really pushing his pawns up the board, wants to be even more aggressive with the pawns than he already was, realizing that having well-placed pieces is not going to win him this game. And now this latest G4 move is preparing for the next pawn to make its entrance up the side of the board. And the question now remains, is having active pawns, aggressive pawns, good enough to take down an otherwise solid black position? And to be honest, I'm not sure. We'll find out soon enough. The pawn that just went forward has been challenged by its black counterpart. Navara choosing to keep going up the board very aggressively, and pawn moves forward. That is one of the riskiest decisions you can take in chess, because pawns don't move backwards. And so once you move forward, you got to know that you can just continue steaming ahead. And that is precisely what David Navara is doing here. He's just getting all his pawns on the king side involved, and now also trying to open up for his bishop, pointing in towards that black king.
Indeed he is. And now I think I've got everything finally in order. This looks like a very unpleasant position for black. Tremendous pressure on e5, pressure down the d file. Just a difficult position to defend here.
Bluebaum has 6 minutes to figure it out. He needs to decide whether or not he's willing to capture the pawn on f4, which will then in return allow the white knight starting to capture the pawns in front of black's king. And like you say, this is a very tricky position for black. But I mean, this is also the kind of position where with the white pieces, you can kind of lose control and end up losing the game, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, if you lose your center pawns, if you allow he takes f4 at the wrong moments, things could definitely tumble out of control here. But the time situation right now is definitely in Navara's favor. Bluebaum is not a big fan of time pressure. He's a good bullet player and he's good in time pressure, but he's not, he's no Andrew Tang. And he just took on f4, allowing knight takes g7 and knight takes h5. But then I guess black can defend the f6 square. And what you talked about, that could actually happen.
Yeah, the decision has been made to start capturing the white pawns, but that's because it also opens up for the rook. There's a knight pointing towards the side of the board as well. This game just got incredibly complicated compared to how shut off and closed it was just 2 moves ago.
Yeah, and knight takes g7 is on the board. So Navara is going to take that pawn, or Bluebaum is going to take that pawn on e4. And after knight takes h7, knight takes h5, knight h7, is white worse there? How do we evaluate that position?
I'm not sure. The white knight will not be able to go into the f6 square with the black knight taking control there. The black rook well placed in the center. The pawn on h4 in trouble. I mean, I wouldn't be confident here with white that I'm doing very well. I would be scared about how black's pieces have really come to life the last couple of moves.
Yeah, and David Navara not really betraying that he's nervous about his position. And Bluebaum is taking a very significant chunk of time. What is the other candidate move here? Is it knight takes h4? Like, what is giving him pause here? I mean, the rook is hanging.
Yeah, I would probably move the rook. It's under attack. There's a pawn I can capture. Bluebaum, after that 1.5 minute think, he does go for the variation we already analyzed. And now black's pieces have gotten themselves in pretty good positions. And the white pawn on the side of the board, having that pressure against it from the black knight, honestly, I don't even see how you save that pawn.
Yeah, knight takes h4 is coming. Maybe knight f2. But then rook takes d2, rook takes d2. And the black rook can move somewhere to attack the bishop, or there's a check on e1. And amazingly, the white king can actually get mated here pretty easily if you're not careful. I mean, there's f3 check, there's knight takes h4 check. So without calculating, it seems extremely dangerous for white.
So all the pieces converging on the white king right now. These are some of the variations David Navara will have to deal with. He is still spending his time, but he's got some saved up. He's got 2 minutes more on the clock, enabling him to take this pause when the situation requires it. He's actually chosen to go for that knight coming into f6, giving a check on the black king, forcing the trade. And then I assume the idea is that afterwards you can run with this pawn, because right now this pawn is not being captured by the black knight, considering the attack white just made on black's rook.
And because the eval bar is not going down, I assume that that was indeed the correct solution. Rook d to e8. So Bluebaum gets rid of the pressure, the tension down the d file. And now the sort of battlefield has shifted. White has full control of the d file, but black is doubled on the e file. And black still has the prospect of the knight from g6 jumping into h4 and threatening various shenanigans on f3 as you're showing.
And that's precisely what's going to happen. The knight jumps in, trying to get further forward to that f3 square. Access denied, says Navara, coming up with his king to prevent that. And then black returns the favor with the rook renewing the control of that f3 square. And the big question now, is that square going to be used for the black rook, or are you still using it for the knight? I'm going to say that control down the e file that black has gotten, even better than that might be the control along the third rank. If black now can get their rook giving a check on the white king, and then come down with the second rook afterwards.
Yeah, rook f3, rook e3. Of course, black also has to be very careful about a white rook appearing on d8. So it's a crazy situation where both sides have the prospect of delivering checkmate. White, of course, by moving the knight away from d3, and then rook d8 check, rook h8 check. And the bishop being on c7 is actually not a deterrent, because the rooks are doubled on the d file. You can afford to give one of them up and still deliver checkmate.
So, well, with that being said, I gotta say this move, I was just moving the knight to kind of showcase that the knight needs to move so that the rooks can get involved into the game. But knight to e1 also takes control of that f3 square we were talking about. So that might actually just be a very nice multi-purpose move.
Yeah, knight e1 defending f3. So maybe after knight e1, black can play. What would black do? Rook h3 with the idea of delivering some sort of perpetual. Rook h2, rook h1, just lateral checks ad
I mean,
nauseum.
I would almost be happy if it's just a perpetual. I would be
Yeah.
scared that the black rook is still coming after the scalp of the white king. I mean, this still looks kind of dangerous to me.
Yeah, and Bluebaum taking a drink of whatever that was. And you know what my theory is? If a player is drinking water during the game, that means they're satisfied with the position.
I
And I
mean,
think Bluebaum sees the draw.
yeah, who wouldn't be? These the knight and rook is in great attacking positions. I'm not sure he's going for the draw. I think he's going for the win at this
He
stage.
is. And to Navara's great concern, he plays the move f3. And after rook d7, you know, that's kind of an empty threat against black's bishop. There's a check on e2. The knight from h4 starts whirling and twirling. Knight f5, knight g3, and the bishop moves into g3. No, this is... I can't believe this got so dangerous so quick.
The white king in some real trouble right now. Navara choosing to push his pawn up on the opposite side. Good move, because it opens up a threat from white's bishop towards that black knight, forcing that knight back before it can cause any trouble. That's definitely something Navara needs to have happen. Black now presumably will play their rook up to give a check on the king. But the reason that white may survive this ordeal is that the knight being forced to move with the threat from the bishop, that means the white knight will be able to take out that very dangerous pawn. Because if that pawn is allowed to live for the next two moves, that's game over.
Agreed completely. And rook e2 check is on the board. So we're expecting king f1.
Well, I'm expecting takes.
Oh, it takes rook takes e2 and then king f1.
Yeah, either I think should be fine.
Yeah, king f1 immediately also seems to be all right. Knight f5, knight takes f3, and by the skin of his teeth, white is surviving.
Yeah, it's scary. It's very scary for this white king. But as far as I can see, there's no checkmate luring. I'm, of course, also somewhat biased being able to look at this eval bar on the left side.
It's a lot less scary when it's 0.5.
Okay.
When it's 0.0. the fear starts to diminish quite a bit when you know there's no objective made. But Navara is terrified right now.
Oh, definitely. And he's trying to figure out the difference of locations. Of course, he's not considering moving his king back on the side, because then if the king steps back diagonally, that will allow the black pawn to continue forward, giving a check in the process. So the only thing he's considering is whether or not he wants to make the trade or go king f1. Navara is gonna go king f1 no matter what. The question is just whether or not he wants to do it now or on the next move. And that's the kind of 50-50 decision that can still have a player spend most of their time trying to grasp the minute differences in those two decisions.
Yeah, 90 seconds. And, you know, we know that there's no difference. But again, David Navara has no idea that king f1, rook takes e2 essentially should lead to the same result. And after king f1, I'm actually struggling to figure out exactly what the most accurate path is even to a draw. Because if you play bishop like a bishop f4 there, then white can jump into d7 all of a sudden. And again, again, the tables turn really fast. And again, white is the one to create mate threats. Very strange how quickly that can happen here. And the knight on h4 is also hanging. So that's very bad for black.
So Navara making his decision. He does choose to make the trade and then step back with his king. The knight is still under threat. Black needs to address that, presumably by moving that knight backwards. And now that the knight has retreated, there's a recapture of the black pawn. And then, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that white pawn was under attack. in this variation. Matthias Bluebaum now refocusing his attention to just trying to make a draw. So now suddenly he's all keen on taking out pawns, realizing that there were no more attacking chances against the white king. We're about to go into the endgame, and then capturing all the opponent's pawns is crucial.
Yeah, but the issue is that now you have a choice between taking the G pawn or taking the bishop. I think taking the bishop's probably out of the question, because then white can take the pawn first with a check and only then take the bishop. And that F7 pawn is going to be a massive danger. But if you take on G6 first, white's rook takes black's bishop, black's knight takes white's bishop, and then after rook takes C6, that looks much worse for black. I mean, that C5 pawn combined with the rook on C6 and the threat of knight D4, I mean, with a minute on the clock, that looks like a terrifying endgame to play. So,
and yet, that is precisely what has happened. Bluebaum taking out the white pawn, then taking out the bishop. But in this conversion of trades, white now has a passed pawn, only 3 squares away from becoming a new queen. The pawn on b5 also a potential problem, not to mention the knight and pawn having those threats against it. And the eval bar has taken a great liking for Navara's situation in this time scramble.
And now all he has to decide is whether to grab that pawn on g6 to check and spend a tempo, or play knight d4. He plays knight d4. I like that decision. The b5 pawn cannot be defended, and if he takes it, he simultaneously defends a3. Jan, this looks like it's almost over. If white just gets connected passers, goodbye.
And that's what Bluebaum is realizing, spending the last of his seconds trying to find a good move in a bad position. Unfortunately for him, that doesn't exist. There are no good moves in a bad position, and Navara takes a second pawn. Now with an extra pawn, he's going to try to get a new queen as well with this c-pawn.
Yeah, he's going to move his rook away from c6. He's just trying to figure out exactly where he should put it. Rook f6 looks logical. But Navara is so good in these critical moments. Like yesterday, I had a winning position against him in time pressure, and he just finds every critical chance in mutual time pressure. And he did that again here. He still has to finish the job, though. The game is not over.
The players do get 2 seconds extra per move that's being made. Okay. Apparently that was a mistake. Oh, the trap!
Oh, Rook A1!
The trap! Rook A1, and look at the reaction from the players. The players, Navara holding his head, Bluebaum celebrating. There will be a repetition of moves,
we have
and
to
we're
show
going to
that.
have to show why that happened. Number one, if the white king tries to step forward, then the knight will move, opening an attack from the rook on the white king, as well as having that pressure against the knight. But also, as that night, we're going to go actually back to that game to kind of rewatch the finish of it, because there was also the option here for the white king to try and step away from that back and forth strategy.
Yeah, that's what he was aiming for, of course.
And here, the rook would come down, give a check, and no matter which direction the king goes up, the idea is that the knight would come in, check on the king. Doesn't matter where the king goes. Both places, the knight will give a check and simultaneously attack the white rook. And that means Matthias Bluebaum, he made a miraculous save, and he has survived the first game of this final. And with that, we're going back to our starting position, the same one as in the first game. But this time, it's David Navara with the black pieces.
Yeah, and we have a symmetrical position. Queen's gambit, queen's pawn structure, castle short. And of all the positions, I think this one is incredibly normal. I think on the normal scale, it's very, very high up. It's not exactly like a chess position. I mean, you have the queen on b1. You have the weird placement of the knights, the queen's knights, which will be on d3 and d6 most likely. Black has already put his knight on d6. But other than that, it's a completely conventional position. There aren't a lot of tactics here. So this is going to be, I think, a long positional struggle. Early, that's what seems to be in the making here, given the opening.
So, what is it you're looking out for when introduced to a new position in Fischer Random? Are you looking out for how your queen is placed, whether you have undefended pawns? What's your main priority?
Yeah, undefended pawns is huge to make sure you don't blunder on move 2, which is absolutely a thing, even in Grandmaster games. Then, once you choose your developmental setup, I think what I tend to do is try to figure out if indeed I'm blocking any of my big pieces. Like if I'm blocking my queen, or if my queen is going to have a very hard time deploying itself in reasonable, within 10, 15 moves, that's a big detractor to any setup. So the main thing I'm focused on is making sure that I have a clear pathway to activation for essentially each of my pieces. And the setup will never be ideal to where you're going to be happy with how every single piece is placed. But you want to avoid a situation where the queen is just like completely hemmed in, for example, and like there's no path to getting it out of the gates.
Yeah, I was making a point in the first game that these bishops, even though they're placed in the middle of the board, that's actually a big disadvantage because bishops enjoy being on the side because then they point in towards the middle. How would you deal with a position like this, which is quite rare, where both bishops are just placed completely central from the get-go?
Yeah, I suppose that is a strange situation. I mean, the way that Navara, the way that Bluebaum has chosen to deal with it is by playing bishop to e2, and probably he's going to put a knight on e5. And the position, maybe the other knight also, maybe knight d5 and then maybe c4, using the bishops to pressure black's queenside in some vague way, but not sure exactly what they're doing. They're just sort of looking at the queenside.
Yeah, so it seems to me like the bishops in the center of the board is one of the big problems of this starting position. And here, David Navara is the one to start being aggressive with the pawns first. Bluebaum playing the move Danya recommended, but immediately being met by a aggressive pawn advance from the Czech player. And very often in chess, it's all about who gets to put the pressure first. And Navara seems to have succeeded in that right now.
But as we talked about earlier, like Navara, he does this all the time. He'll make a move instantly in a critical moment. And it's very disconcerting to deal with that because you can't imagine that he can arrive at a decision so quickly. And then it seems to be a very good decision. So, that was affecting me yesterday. It was causing some annoyance. And you're tempted to play fast. But somehow when I play a move instantly, like suddenly turns out to be a mistake. I unfortunately need to think. So.
And in this final, the players do have quite some time to think. They start out with 15 minutes each. They get 2 extra seconds per move that's being made. And we're going to be playing a best of 4 games format. Right now, it's tied at half a point each. But the story could have been quite different with David Navara having a big advantage in the first game, making a mistake as both players were down to just 20 seconds on the clock.
Yeah, and a lot to think about here as the pawn square is formed with white's last move. There is an idea here of playing knight d6 to f5 with the aim of taking the support away from the e5 knight, taking twice on d4. But in that situation, white can actually put the queen on b2 and eliminate the possibility of that tactic.
But how would you feel then about putting the queen on the same diagonal?
Yeah, not fantastic. Not fantastic, but black has a hard time getting the heavy pieces out of the gates. I mean, the bishop on e8 now seems to be some dead weight here. Maybe put it on c6 at some point to increase the blood flow among black's position. Rook f8 to d8 becomes possible. But
yeah, I'm just going to take the moves that were played because it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty much identical to what you were talking about. a trade has been made in the center, and then this knight f5 move, putting pressure on the d4 pawn. And instead of going with the queen on the same diagonal as black's bishop, Bluebaum does decide that the queen needs to get involved, and she comes out from her hiding spot to offer protection for the d4 pawn.
But now especially I would go bishop c6, because then after you put the rook on d8, again the white queen finds itself in a rather uncomfortable situation, being x-rayed by the rook, and the d4 pawn, its long-term prospects really worry me. If black can pile up the pressure on that queen a7, another excellent move by Navara.
The queen rearing its head to put more pressure in the center. Bluebaum now just has to go on the defensive, moving his rook in from the side of the board. But then Navara will do the same. The fight now is all about the d4 pawn, with both players pointing in towards it. The difference being that Bluebaum's pieces pointing towards that d4 pawn. The pawn is essentially blocking white's pieces, but it's a blockade that's necessary to avoid the pawn being lost.
Yeah, I mean, rook d1, rook d8, and okay, Bluebaum takes on d5. Bluebaum takes on d5, and we'd like to thank, by the way, Helen Murph 69 for the big raid party of 451. We appreciate it. Welcome everybody to the show. And Bluebaum continues to struggle here. He's definitely worse. Black seems to be having all the fun in this position.
And right now, the immediate threat is the one against the pawn on d4. And Bluebaum, with a controversial decision, decides to let that pawn go.
Wow.
He says it's so much of an hassle keeping the pawn protected. He's just saying, go ahead, Navara, take my pawn. Because when this pawn is captured, Bluebaum then will bring his rook in, attack the bishop, and when the bishop moves, the pawn is lost behind it. So that was, as far as I can tell, a very clever way from Bluebaum, trying to get out of all this this pressure Black had lined up.
Yeah, Bluebaum's actually a very clever player. He's very tricky, as we saw in the last game. And knight g4 was a big move. I mean, if Navara does not take on d4, then that begs the question, well, what does he do? I mean, moving the bishop from f6 back seems to, it's possible you can play bishop e7 and claim that you still have pressure, but Bluebaum is going to breathe a little bit easier than knowing that he's not losing the d4 pawn imminently. So it would be very nice if Black could get bishop takes d4 to work, but I can't quite figure out how to do that.
And that means Black may be forced to retreat. And what I'm noticing is that both players are really struggling with the development of their bishop that started the game on e1 and e8 respectively. And how is Bluebaum getting his bishop into play?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question. We have a trade of knights. And bishop e8. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that trade makes it easier for Navara to solve that issue. Now Navara can just step one forward with his bishop. But Bluebaum, if he tries something similar, that bishop will be captured by the Black Knight, I would think. And I really like, capturing the bishop pair. So I would think here Black would have an advantage if he can keep both of his bishops.
Or Black can keep the knight on e4 and play bishop f6 and rook fe8. I think it's always a matter of taste in such positions, whether you keep the initiative or you trade it in for, long-term advantages. But it is clear that Black is still having all the fun. It's nice the way that Navara has been able to diversify his investments, so to speak. Like, he had pressure on d4, but now he's got pressure on the e file, and he's got a nice knight, which he has to maintain. And that's his next goal, is to make sure that bishop d3 does not come with a significant amount of venom, and bishop f6 is great.
Bishop f6, the bishop returns to where it came from now that the knights have been traded off. The bishop's pressure against d4 means white needs to stay on the defensive. Coming up, probably Danya's move, bishop c6, followed by a rook to the middle. If that rook gets there, with the queen still stuck on the e3 square, black's rook would be able to do so much damage.
Oh, tremendous damage. And b4, an attempt by Matthias to, well, first of all, to take this thing out of bishop c6, because then white will be able to push the pawn to b5 and force the bishop back. But second of all, of course, to open a second front, a takes b4 is not really possible. The rook in the corner, the rook on f8 gets trapped. So early in the match, Matthias has been on the back foot constantly, but he's shown quite some inventiveness, and he might try to push the pawn at b5 now anyway to prevent bishop c6.
So white was trying to get their e1 bishop into play. That has been the major topic of discussion, how to get this bishop involved. He tried to make a trade with the black pawn so that the bishop could get out there. David Navara saying, no, I'm not going to allow the bishop getting into play that easily. And now Danya's suggestion, b5, would make life difficult for the black bishop, having that same issue of getting involved into the game.
Yeah, this is a very strange looking position. I mean, you still have this after effect of the bishops being on their very strange original squares. And neither side has quite finished solving the problem of activating the bishops. So a big moment here for Bluebaum. Can he continue to keep his foot on the gas pedal and prevent black's initiative from getting out of control?
And I gotta say, I really like this move from the German player, because what is Navara's plan? Well, it's moving his bishop out either one step or two steps. This knight coming in, taking charge of those very same squares. And at the same time, another thing we talked about in Navara's position, the knight being very strong on the e4 square. Well, not anymore. That knight can now be pushed away by white's pawn. And as we can tell from the eval bar, making a solid jump in white's favor, it seems as though Bluebaum somehow was able to solve his e1 bishop problems way better than Navara, because now I feel like if pawn to f3, that bishop can also get out towards the king side of the board.
Oh yeah, for sure. And queen b3 makes sense. The eval bar crept down a little bit, but we can't fault him for playing this move, attacking d5. And as you're saying, I mean, f3 and then maybe bishop g3, or even a bishop can adopt a defensive posture on f2, but at least then it'll be doing something. It'll be protecting the d4 square, and the knight will be kicked away from e4. So the tension continues to accumulate. I think we're about to see some sort of a climax in this game. Eventually, something's got to give for one of the sides. Eventually.
And right now, Navara to move. He's down 1 minute on the clock, and he's facing the threat against his central pawn. That pawn is frankly not that easy to defend, and Navara is taking extraordinary measures to deal with the situation. Wow, he unprovokedly chooses to trade his bishop for the knight, because then he can move his other bishop forward, thinking that this bishop couldn't do that earlier because of the threat white's knight had towards it. That being said, now black's pieces are being forced back on all fronts. First, the knight in the middle of the board being chased by the white pawn. That knight only has one safe square. And the reason then why Navara is thinking is because he's wondering whether he now needs to make something happen quick. He has a queen pointing down towards the white king, and he's choosing to exercise that opportunity to give a check on the white king by moving the pawn. So the queen gives the check, but it's the pawn making the move. The black pawn now threatening on a4. and capturing that, putting pressure on the queen as well. This has become quite the tactical game after a slow positional start. White is right now down a pawn, but there are threats against the black knight in the center, and also against the black pawns on the queen side.
Yeah, the threat against the knight is the big one. You have to play knight g5. And then it feels that white is just better. I mean, yeah, I mean, knight g5, b takes a5, and white also has a lot of pawn mobility on the king side, f4 possibilities, the bishop pair. I mean, it just seems like Bluebaum has won, the early middle game struggle here. Navara is now firmly on the defensive.
The question then remains, will Bluebaum be able to capitalize on his advantage? Navara had a similar thing going on in the first game where he faltered in time trouble. The big difference here being that while Navara only had some seconds left on his clock when he made his mistake, Bluebaum here with 7.5 minutes could have the necessary time to find the right moves and lead white's pieces to victory.
What do you think Navara is thinking about? Is there an alternate here?
I mean, I think he's considering just capturing as many pawns as he can.
Oh, wow. So that's how desperate the situation has become. A takes b4 and b3.
Yeah,
He
and that's
plays it.
what Navara does. Navara sacrifices his
Very
knight
interesting.
using that normal defensive technique of thinking that you can salvage a draw from a bad situation if the opponent only has pawns on one side of the board. So here Navara says that it was so crucial to get rid of that final white pawn on the queen side, thinking that there were situations where that queenside pawn could be the deciding factor. He's given up his knight, but he's hoping to make a draw here with white not having that diversion strategy of having a pawn on the opposite side of the board.
Queen takes b3, I was going to say, and Navara missed it. I mean, you could just tell he forgot about that move. And now a takes b3, rook takes a7, b2 looks scary. But white just has bishop e1 to c3. Attacking the pawn, the rook on f1 finally enters the game. And it enters the game in a big way in a defensive role. And once black, or maybe that's not the most accurate move, but this is one possibility. You can also play bishop b4, but clearly black does not have sufficient compensation for the piece.
So the reason this is such a big move for Bluebaum is that while these two pawns are working together, protecting each other, they are just a force to be reckoned with. And this queen takes b3 move, it doesn't win a pawn for white, because now white will have to give up the pawn in the center. But the big difference is that after these trades, then the black pawn on the queen side is flying solo and will be very difficult to defend in the long run. Well,
yeah,
in the short
it won't
run
seem
as
to
well.
be flying for very long. I mean, it's going to be picked off by one of the bishops. And now we're going to see, if Navara can pull another rabbit out of the hat. If he can, in the situation he has here is even more critical than the one Bluebaum had at the end of the last game when they were both in severe time pressure. Here, Matthias has almost 7 minutes on his clock, and that is what worries me most. White has so much time for conversion here.
Pre-move from Bluebaum, the queens have been exchanged off the board. The black pawn now trying a last-ditch attempt at making it to the other side, getting a new queen. And Danya's suggestion here with bishop c3, we saw that got some negative responses from the eval bar, leading us to think that this is still very much a tricky situation to deal with. The black pawn now only one step away from becoming a new queen.
I think the reason the engine is disapproving of bishop c3 is maybe something ridiculous like bishop c3, bishop b5. And the bishop is in the line of fire of black's rook. And after bishop takes b5, rook takes c3, all of a sudden, black has all these very, very scary threats. Rook b3 is a threat and rook c1 is a threat. And, that pawn, it might have been flying solo, but now it's causing actual trouble. So bishop b4 seems like a much safer way to approach the task of containing this pawn, bishop b4 and bishop d6.
So
Potentially, if you need bishop d6, you can play it because that's an anchor spot for the bishop.
Bishop b4 being recommended, but what about then rook to b8?
That is very nasty.
Yeah, I don't mind giving up my rook if that means I can get a new queen. Because right now, like, white could lose this game. If you take my queen, the rook comes in, the king is trapped in the corner. This is definitely a tricky situation to deal with. And that's why Bluebaum spent so much time before making the move bishop to d2. So he's still moving the bishop. He's still opening up for his rook to control the queening square. But he's avoiding all those situations we just saw in which that white bishop ends up being attacked by black's rooks.
Right. Yeah, rook b1 is coming. The clock is ticking. And the moment white wins the b2 pawn, provided that he can keep his bishops alive, this should be a pretty straightforward technical win for Bluebaum.
Okay, and that may be what we're seeing Navara choosing to capture in the center. He's just trying to eliminate as many pawns as he can in white's camp. The fewer the pawns, the better your defensive chances are. And there are situations where even though you're down a bishop, you can salvage the draw as long as you get rid of all of the opponent's pawns. So the big question now remains whether or not Navara can capture the pawn on e5. That would be a major accomplishment, getting him so much closer to saving this game.
Yeah, rook a2 is played. No, you're right. If you can win e5, then you could make the argument, okay, black has 4-on-2 on the king side, and maybe you can somehow... But even then, I think even if black plays rook fe8 and you play rook takes b2, I just don't see black saving that in the long run. White's eventually going to park the light squared bishop on c4. The other bishop's going to come out to c3. I mean, in my experience, these types of open-ended endgames where you can torture somebody for 500 moves are incredibly hard to save. Although yesterday against some idiot, Navara apparently saved a tough endgame.
I was going to say, we actually saw Navara rescuing a draw in that semifinal yesterday. That was against none other than co-commentator Danya. If anyone's capable, it's got to be the Czech Grandmaster.
Oh, look at this idea. Amazing. And this is what he does. E3, bishop takes c3. I think the idea is bishop takes g2, rook c2, and b1 equals queen.
Wow.
Amazing defensive idea. Look at this.
If bishop takes, he will sacrifice his bishop to get his rook up. The rook is both defending his own pawn and attacking the white bishop. And if the white bishop is defended, you think you got the situation under control, but that's not the case because the pawn moves forward, becomes a new queen. Yes, the new queen is immediately eliminated, but then you've opened up between the rooks, getting this situation where black now has a rook in exchange for 2 bishops. It's still not good.
Of course,
for black.
even this is tough. You can lose even this, but
it's much better having a rook for 2 bishops than having a pawn for 1 bishop.
Yeah, this is like sleeping in the open fields and then getting a 1-star hotel. You're more than happy to get that endgame. But Bluebaum is not falling for any of Navara's tricks. I mean, he just, he's in that mentality where he understands that with every move, Navara is setting a trap, and he's just seeing right through it. I mean, he knows that bishop takes c3 is like, he's not just going to automatically play the obvious move. And he's doing an amazing job of it so far. Bishop b4 attacking the rook on f8. Now bishop takes g2 is ineffective because the rook on f8 is hanging.
Well, is it though?
I was thinking about it, but I don't think it... maybe you can still try it.
I mean, it definitely feels like the best try.
Yeah, maybe you should.
Just keep going for that same tricky plan. Well, one of the things is that with this bishop takes g2 move, you're eliminating more pawns. And the fewer the pawns, the better your chances of survival. And speaking of that, now with that latest move, Navara pointing up against the pawn on e5, the fewer the pawns, the better chance for black to survive. This might actually be a great opportunity. Oh no, bishop
but
d6.
still,
Yeah.
but still bishop g2, rook c2, and Bluebaum, I think, is he shook his head there because he realizes that like the e5 pawn is hanging and he has not solved the underlying issue. He's put a band-aid over it, but now again, bishop takes g2. The wound is still there. Bishop takes g2, rook c2 is still a threat. How do you defend against both at the same time?
And now you don't even have that much time to figure it out.
And that's what happened to me yesterday, where I took like almost all of my time in a critical moment. And when you're sitting there where Bluebaum is right now, your time, and you can confirm this soon, Ludwig, that your time evaporates so quickly. We think, oh, it's 2.5 minutes. That's so much time. You blink your eyes, and before you know it, you've got 3 seconds. It's uncanny how fast your time ticks when you're actually calculating.
And Navara playing an amazing defensive effort here. He is not favored by the eval bar on the left side. It's massively in white's favor, just barely. We can see some black on the top. But that isn't necessarily the case in practical play. And David Navara here really showing that he can pose a lot of problems that white has to sift through. And those problems have now led to Matthias Bluebaum actually spending so much time. He's down on the clock, and Navara executes his main plan of sacrificing the bishop and then coming in with the
beautiful
rook.
He's 2 bishops down. How often do you see that? 2 bishops down, and he's winning a lot of material back. And Bluebaum does end up going for that endgame we talked about, and he goes rook b7. So Matthias says, okay, I'm going to play bishop c4. I'm going to step on the gas pedal and try to take out that f7 pawn. But it ain't that easy, because even after you play bishop c4, black's rook can defend from the f file. Rook f2 check would be possible. But this is a nasty endgame for Navara with 90 seconds.
Navara might even sacrifice his rook against this bishop. This bishop is so powerful, potentially, that you might just sacrifice and then say, well, I'm going to trade off some pawns afterwards. Yeah, it's probably going to be objectively lost, but in practical play, with both players just having a minute left, I mean, do you think that's a bad decision to kind of clarify the situation right now?
I think it's suboptimal because white can build up a big time advantage there. I think David should try to defend with both of his rooks, and he does. That's more annoying for Bluebaum, because if Bluebaum starts to fail to figure out a way to get his light squared bishop onto that diagonal, he's going to start experiencing frustration. So first order of business, he takes on e3.
But now Navara is sacrificing.
But how is he going to say? How is Bluebaum going to ensure that David sacrifices?
Well, king d3, no?
But can't you also king d3 move the rook back, let's say, to c8?
But rook c8, bishop g4. And then this bishop is kind of infiltrating against the
rook c8, bishop d4, rook c d8, and I guess you have bishop d7.
I do think Navara is planning to sacrifice his rook for a bishop, but he's doing it under even more favorable circumstances than I was considering earlier.
Rook takes e5 is already almost a draw. How is Bluebaum going to defend h2? He might have to play bishop e2. And then David has phenomenal drawing chances. And Bluebaum is so frustrated. He senses that he's very, very close to letting this slip. If David wins that last pawn and keeps his own king safe, it is a draw, and he's going to save that.
Well, I mean, it might even be a draw here. Just g6 and keep the king on a dark square. It's not clear to me how white is breaking through that.
And I can totally relate to what Bluebaum's going through right now. Like, he's telling himself, really? Like, we have this endgame and I had that other thing like 10 moves ago? Okay, but David is trying to figure out the optimal defensive setup. He's trying to figure out where he should position his pawns for maximal chances of a fortress. And I agree with you. I think g6 is the best arrangement, and
Yeah.
David also agrees.
So we need to have control of some of the light squares so that this light squared bishop of whites doesn't get to reign free. The white king moving up.
You know what else sucks about white's chances is the fact that the pawn is the wrong color. But go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So if the rooks are traded here, that's a well-known drawing situation, which is what Danya means with the wrong color. The bishop cannot control the queening square, which offers some additional defensive resources for black.
And now David just says, I'm going to chill. I'm just going to go king h8, king g8, and come take my e5 pawn. And if white takes it with the rook, that triggers a rook trade and results in an immediate draw.
Not anymore.
Rook a5, I think he wants rook c1 and rook h1. God, every move is a trick.
Okay, so the black king is kind of stuck in the corner, but as long as it's not getting checkmated, that's fine. The white king is trying to capture the pawn on e5, but it's struggling to do so because of what we mentioned, that a rook trade is not sufficient for white. So you somehow need to manage to capture this pawn without the black rook being available to defend.
This is unbelievably precise.
Ooh, and now, and now the king even got out.
Yeah, but king h6, rook a7, and you might be in Zugzwang.
I don't think so.
1 second?
I like the fact that we got the king out of the corner. I was not feeling confident about the king in the corner. And now Navara is bringing his king up. The king takes care of business. The king takes out the last white pawn, but he's still not out of the danger zone.
No.
He needs to get his king away from the edge of the board. This is a rook and bishop versus rook situation. It's supposed to be a draw with correct play.
He did it. He's getting happy to give up the pawn. And now he's going to set up the famous drawing, the Cochrane method, I think, where you put the rook on d4, the king on f2, and this is a very well-known theoretical drawing setup. He should be able to hold this, but we've seen this endgame be lost a gazillion times by very strong players.
I mean, the player with the extra bishop is regularly winning this game in rapid chess. When they have 10 seconds extra per move they make. And here they only get an additional 2 seconds per move. It's going to be a very good defensive effort from Navara making a draw from this point, not to mention the fact he made an incredible play to land in this situation to begin with. I'm just going to make a mental note that the last capture of the pawn was made on move 56. Bishop takes h5. That means on move 106, there have been played 50 moves without a pawn being moved or a piece being captured. So that is the big goal for David Navara at this point. He wants to get to move 106.
I'm not sure why Bluebaum didn't give a check on b1 there and toss the king to the a file. I think Matthias has just lost his heart. Yeah, rook b1 check and
no, but this is the standard technique, right? The king
and he's
goes
just doing
in
it from
one
the
direction,
side.
And you go with your king in the opposite direction.
You tag the bishop with the rook so that white's king cannot easily move to the side. And if the bishop moves away, then rook b4.
Then you go for the trade.
No, this is the demonstration of phenomenal technique by David Navara so far. But all it takes is one sloppy move, and you find yourself on the last string.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to save this in an over the board game?
Yes, I have, and I lost it once. I drew it once. I lost it once. I won it twice, and I never drew it with the extra bishop.
David's making more progress than Matthias. He's pushing white's king away. I had to draw it against Alex Yermolinsky one time, and then I was on the bishop side of things against Bouchangi. Played it for about 150 moves. It was my longest game of my career. 149 moves because white also had a pawn. And so I played 50 moves with the pawn on the board and then another 50 without the pawn. But he held it.
Yeah, and another person who's holding it is David Navara. We're on move 100. David Navara only needs to make another 6 moves to
Yes,
save
that's
himself,
it.
and he's definitely making that because
Not even
Bluebaum.
close.
Yeah, Bluebaum is not even close to catching
mean,
the Black King in the corner of the board.
The Black King is like, I'm in heaven right now. I'm not even King B5, King B7. It's waltzing around the board. What an unbelievable save by David Navara. I mean, that game looked like he was dead in the water. And how many stages of the game did he have to save, Jan Ludwig? Not just Rook and Bishop, but like 3 or 4 times.
Incredible defensive effort. David Navara awarded the draw here for his fantastic play. This final is tied at 1-1. And before we take a break, going into the next Fischer Random opening position, we want to remind you that after the worldwide qualifiers, we're closing in on the Chess.com Global Championship. It has a $1 million prize fund at stake when it returns on September the 14th. Watch some of the greatest players on the planet compete for the title of Chess.com Global Champion and some serious bragging rights. Type !CGC in chat for more information on that event, and then we will return with the Fischer Random World Championship qualifier after this break.
Welcome back to the World Fischer Random Chess Championship. We are watching the finals between Grandmaster Matthias Bluebaum, Grandmaster David Navara. This is a 4-game affair. 2 games are in the books. Jon Ludwig, we just saw an unbelievable save by David Navara to bring the match to a 1-1 score. And it's all coming down to the wire, just like the first qualifier.
Yeah, and you got to say it was kind of deserved for Navara. That effort he put into it really deserved to get something out of it. And both players had chances to win their white games. And now with both players making mistakes, failing to win promising positions, the score is tied at 1, and we're ready to step into game number 3, where we will have a new starting position. And as always, when we have a new position, we got to watch out for where are our bishops placed, are there any undefended pawns, and to start out here, we have Navara immediately challenging with the black pieces. He's challenging the black pawn in the center.
Yeah, and David taking a little bit longer than usual on move 1. I mean, his average is about 5 seconds. And e4, f5. He's trying to open up his queen very early. What I'm noticing, the bishops in the corner, h1 and h8, those can be very dangerous. Either side can play g3, g6, and aim at the b7 pawn. That's a very tender pawn. So that's something the players should make a mental note of. The knight from b8, Jon Ludwig, the relieving thing for players, that the knights are in a normal square. So knight c6, knight f6 is probably going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And knight f3, knight c3 for white. And a trade on f5. I like David's opening here.
He got his queen out early, but we're also often telling new players that you shouldn't bring your queen out. She will be pressured by the opponent's pieces. But here, bringing the queen out has led to an advantage for black, according to the eval bar. Why is this okay now and not okay when we're teaching new players?
Yeah, I mean, if only I knew. I think I'd be sitting there instead of, one of the 2 players. But I don't really understand why black is better here. I guess this move f5 has given black a better control of the center, but black still has to move his pawns into the center, and that's exactly what David does by playing d5.
And if he manages to play e5 in the future, that will be some devastating central control for black. And this is not the first time I've seen Navara having the black pieces, but really seizing control early on.
No, his openings with black are incredible. I mean, I was worse out of the opening against him yesterday. I sort of played one little sloppy move. He responded really, really quickly and really accurately. So I think David probably puts a lot of effort into studying a lot of the initial Fischer random positions, which is a totally legitimate method of getting better at the game.
And here we see him developing his knight. Both players trying to get ready to castle, but the way Matthias Bluebaum is going to castle is by moving his rook 1 step to the side, and then he miraculously gets the other rook coming to the other side of white's king. We should talk a little bit about the special castling rules that apply when the kings are not starting on their normal squares. And in Fischer Random, for instance, now Navara can play his rook up the board. If it was his turn, he could play the rook up. Bluebaum could play the rook to the side. And here, in order to castle, Navara would then place his king over his own rook. The rook would then catapult itself to the other side of the king, while the king remains where it is, because the the castling rules still apply in respect that the kings end up on where they normally go in a normal game of chess. And similarly for Bluebaum, he can also castle, his king remaining on the same square, but his rook getting in from the corner.
Right. So the important thing is not the initial king placement, it is whether the king can be placed on c1 and the rook on d1, whether the path to castling is unobstructed. And indeed, as you've been showing that both sides. Oh, no, I apologize. I I saw the king on c1 and the rook on d1. And for some reason, I assumed both sides had castled. But in fact, Mattia is playing rook e1, I think, in order to prepare castling. And what castling really means in this situation is actually just bringing the rook from a1 to d1 and getting it into the game.
And that pressure down the e-file will be something White tries to benefit from. Navara, of course, clearly seeing Bluebaum's plan. How do you feel about a move like bishop to h5?
Pretty positively, controlling some key squares.
And now I have a big question for you. What are the
Yes.
rules here? Would White be allowed to castle, considering that the White king would then not be moving to a square that's
Wow.
controlled by an enemy piece?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, it's not a great idea, but I think the answer is yes. I think it's legal.
Yes, it is.
It is, because
It is legal.
It's all about where the king starts. But if the king had been on e1 or f1 in the starting position, then you wouldn't have been able to castle.
So it's all about what squares the king has to pass through on its way to the c1 square. And because the king is in its initial position here, that would be okay. Wow, I genuinely learned something right there.
Well, for a long time, actually, when I was inexperienced at Fischer Random, of course, I was already a GM. Like I didn't even know how castling worked. So like I would basically play entire games without castling. I just could not understand for the life of me, like how does it work? And then eventually I finally understood it. And it revolutionized my game.
We actually had a funny situation in the Swiss qualifier on Monday, where one of the players who actually ended up going into the quarterfinals, Alexander Donchenko, he didn't know how to execute castles in a situation where it's difficult for me to put it on the board for everyone to see, but the king was on f8 and the rook was on h8. And normally then you move your king to the square where it's going to land, and then the rook comes over to the other side. But the problem here, the problem was both king to g8 and castling was legal. So when he put his king to the side, the server interprets that as the king moving to g8 as opposed to castling, because if you wanted to castle, you needed to move your king over your rook to indicate that uniquely you wanted the castling move, not the king just stepping one to the side. And that was in the decisive 9th round game against Alexander Lenderman. And Donchenko went from having an equal position to having a losing position because of that error in castling execution. That being said, he actually ended up winning that game and qualifying. But yeah, it goes to show that even grandmasters struggle with Fischer Random Chess. So if you want to beat a grandmaster, maybe specializing in Fischer Random and those lesser known rules could be beneficial.
Well, speaking of specializing, in the meantime, I think David continues to build up a very impressive position. He's got a big space advantage. He's got superior central control. That pawn on d5 is restricting 2 of White's minors. The knight on c3, the bishop on h1. Both of them are just sort of passively staring at the pawn. And Matthias just has felt pretty discombobulated this entire game so far. And I think the last game has given David a great deal of confidence, which he's been putting to very good use here.
And I gotta say, Navara has continuously managed to get good situations out of the opening. Yeah, he got into trouble in the previous game, but it wasn't the opening's fault. And once again, he's showcasing himself as one of those players who managed to get at the essence of the position really, really well. Because that's what it's all about. When you get that new situation, you just got to try and figure out in a minute or two, how do I want this game to proceed? And the plan he has had, being aggressive with these pawns on the king side, that plan has just been incredibly effective. And the black queen entered the game on move 2. Normally that means it's going to be chased around, but the queen is still standing where it started out. And Bluebaum has not been able to punish black for bringing the queen out early.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. The queen indeed has not moved at all. And Matthias is sinking into a pretty long think here. I don't see... I mean, I think long castles make sense here. I don't think white has any clear active plan. White just has to kind of sit around and wait.
And chess players hate sitting around waiting while the opponents can just improve their position step by step. And that's why I guess both of us is very surprised at the eval bar on the left side, which is an indicator of who's doing better. And the eval bar, while it is in black's favor, there's more black than white. It's not saying a massive black advantage, which is kind of what you would think is going on based on the placement of the pieces.
Yeah, but I guess on the other hand, white doesn't have any targets. I think white is very passive, but he's also very solid. And black can improve all he wants, but eventually he's going to have to choose a specific target to attack. And I think that's the reason, why Bluebaum still remains very solid despite a very passive position.
But then what are you going to do? Is Bluebaum basically just going to go back and forth over the next couple of moves? Like Navara is going to castle. He just did that.
King B1. I mean, I think Bluebaum has a couple of improving moves. King B1. No, but it is extremely uncomfortable. You're pointing out E5. Black has this plan of going E5, like rook E8 and E4 even. And, things could get really, really dicey in the center there.
Yeah, and also, I mean, if you want to go King B1, maybe I'll go D4 at some point. Like D4, trying to get my queen over here, pointing down on that king. Also, at the same time, opening up for my bishop in that same direction. I mean, I do get your point that white is very solid. I just feel like in human play, having nothing to do is some of the worst things you can imagine. Because a human struggles doing nothing psychologically. It's just you have this desire to improve your pieces, and then you end up making a bad plan instead of having no plan.
Right. You just get impatient with yourself, and we've seen so many games that go exactly in that way. Okay, so David's turn to take a significant think. The clock's beginning to creep down, but it's not yet any kind of issue for either side. And I guess David is deciding whether to push his e-pawn up to e5 or not.
Yeah, I dislike Navara's time management here. I think it would be so much better for him to just push the pawns forward in the center and then kind of see what happens and try and build a time advantage instead of trying to be extremely accurate with the moves, but then not having the pressure on the clock as a helper in this next phase. That being said, I gotta say Bluebaum now has showcased that he has a plan. And I got to say, I did not see this plan of moving the knight over in front of White's own king. And that is a great plan, offering more protection for the White king, utilizing a knight that was doing absolutely nothing where it started out.
Yeah, no, I like that idea as well. It's quite typical in such positions. And if he can get the knight on b3, then maybe he starts thinking about taking more active steps toward developing counterplay. I don't know what these steps will be. I actually don't know what the follow-up is going to be after he puts his knight on b3, but we can cross that bridge when we get there. That's the kind of approach you should take in such a position.
Yeah, and now Bluebaum should be using that strategy I talked about for Navara. Like, just play instantly. If you're gonna have a bad position, you might as well be up on time. And once you've identified a very nice plan of improving the placement of your pieces, just go ahead and do that. And have 1 minute more on the clock instead of, I guess, second guessing, which is what he's doing now.
Maybe he's worried about knight c1, knight d. Oh, no, that blunders the pawn on e7. I apologize. I was going to say knight c1, knight d4, but e7 is going to hang.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So knight d4 captures the pawn.
Yes. He's played a very bold move indeed. He played f4, which crossed my mind, but I didn't like it on account of g4.
Yeah, and that is the move Navara will play here. Once again, not liking Navara's time management. The move g4 is completely obvious in my mind. So shame on me if he then ends up playing something else. But as long as he's playing the obvious move here, he should not be spending more than 10 seconds on that decision. And we saw earlier how Navara had a promising position, but he got low on time. That was the first game of this match. And he spoiled what should have been a win. And if he continues spending his time in these irrelevant... Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say GF is a move and then e5. I'm skeptical about this because with the open F file comes a significant amount of counterplay for white. But David making a very unconventional decision there to avoid playing g4.
Wow, he's letting his opponent's pieces get into play. Now, one of the main advantages of playing this g4 move is that the position remains completely blocked. And in particular, the white pawn on f4 is standing in the way of the bishop, standing in the way of the knight, and white just remains very cramped. For instance, this bishop in the corner, I don't see any hope of this bishop returning into play. However, having made that trade with the pawns, yes, black gets a nice center, these two pawns standing next to each other, but now I can definitely see this bishop getting back into play. And as Danya noted, there's going to be pressure down on black's central, on f-file pieces. So yeah, I don't like that decision from Navara, but he remains with the advantage thanks to his good control of the middle of the board.
But now, you have spoken the truth. He's down 2.5 minutes, and that could be huge for Matthias Bluebaum because the game still has not really reached its, not even its client. It really, we're just entering the middle game if you think about it. And Queen e6 posing a devilish threat of d5, d4, chasing the knight out of c3 and leading to checkmate on a2. So Matthias has to address that, but b3 is very weakening, so he chooses, d4, allowing e4.
Interesting decision here in the middle of the board. White manages to regain control of the f4 square. We talked about how it would be bad for white to have a pawn here because that square could be utilized for the bishop and the knight. And that is precisely what Bluebaum is doing. In fact, I think he wants both those pieces. I think he's going to want to move this bishop now so that the knight can follow in the bishop's tracks. Mm-hmm. I'm liking this strategy for white because white now has some control in the center using that d4 pawn. The major drawback is the bishop on h1, which is now
the fact the pawn on e4 is incredibly well protected. It's going to be there, when the dinosaurs roam the earth again. That pawn's there to stay.
Yeah. Well, actually, I feel like these kind of pawns that's very well protected but has no hope of pushing forward in the immediate future. I feel like sometimes if you can get a knight in front of that pawn,
Mm-hmm.
that situation can really turn around and actually become a problem for the player with the pawn. So, in my mind, the main value here of this guy is that it's blocking the bishop in the corner. And now we've had a situation where Navara went back and forth with his pieces. So we've had now the same position twice, and Navara keeps repeating, and he's offering
Draw.
a draw.
And Bluebaum's gonna take
Bluebaum
it.
now, if he moves his bishop back, that's going to be 3 times same position. That's a draw with 1 game remaining in this final. And Bluebaum having that 2.5-minute time advantage, he's considering playing the game
but
on.
It makes zero sense here. I mean, White's solidly slightly worse, so I think the draw is the right decision for Matthias.
But was it the right decision for Navara?
Was it the right? I mean, I think you called it. I think he's down to 4 minutes, and the middle game is only beginning. Knight b3, knight c5 is on deck, and I just think he got worried about the game turning in White's favor.
And to avoid that, he should have been playing quicker earlier on. But on the other hand, now he will have the white pieces in the decisive final game. So this final now standing tied at 1.5, 1.5. There's 1 more game to decide it. The winner of this game will make it to Iceland, to the World Championship. Competing with Wesley So, competing with Magnus Carlsen. And if this final game is a draw, then we will have an Armageddon game to decide it. A game where Black gets less time on the clock, but where Black then also gets the advantage of winning the match in case of a drawn result. From the beginning here, we see both players just copying each other, and that doesn't really inspire confidence that we're going to see a winner in this game.
Right.
Navara first, pawn 2 squares forward. Bluebaum does the same. The pawn opening up for the bishop, pointing down the board. Bluebaum does the same. The knight comes in for both players, and now, after knight f3 from Navara, what are the odds of knight f6 here from Bluebaum?
I'm thinking, yeah, they're pretty high. I mean, knight f6 looks totally reasonable, as does something like e5, which is a more ambitious approach to the position, but maybe the lack of development is going to cost Black there. But I also wanted to say that, there's at least $20,000 on the line in this game. And it sounds crazy, but the minimum prize in Reykjavik is something like 20K. So the players, I'm sure, are totally aware of that. This is a super high stakes game.
Wow. So a lot of nerves having to be held under control as
Right.
Navara here moves his pawn cautiously forward, I would say, in the middle. I don't see Navara winning this game with the strategy he's using right now.
Yeah, the position seems very sterile. Very, very sterile. It's totally symmetrical. And Bluebaum says, hey, I'm more than happy to repeat for as long as the position remains closed. And I feel like David he's playing aimlessly in this opening.
And now, aggressively, all of a sudden, moving his pawn 2 steps forward. That could be a long-term problem for White in that you now no longer have any pawns that can control the e4 square. But when Black copies in kind, Black gets the same problem, that there are no pawns to take control over the e5 square. They're kind of creating a situation where these White central pawns are just being blocked by the Black central pawns, and we're not really gonna get anywhere. Do you see a draw offer happening here?
Yeah, but I I think David's going to play this. I think he's going to go maybe a3. I think we're still going to see some intrigue in this game. I feel like White's going to find some way to unbalance this.
Who
Maybe
do you
95.
think? Who do you think is the most confident, based on the games thus far?
It's hard to say. I mean, Bluebaum was obviously very upset after game 2, but the last game I think was positive for him emotionally because he got a dubious position and he held it. So maybe that gave him some confidence. I would say it's totally 50-50. I mean, neither player is overly broken up about the current match situation.
In my opinion, I would probably say that Navara has been playing the best, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's the most confident, because, well, that relates more to a player's personality than their ability on the board. Would you agree with that, or do you think you need to have a very high skill to be confident?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it is the case, I think, that overall Navara has had probably more good positions, but the sample size is so small. When you've got like a 4-game match, it's still not a lot. And you know, anything happens in one game, one moment, and no matter how you've played the rest of the match, like that one moment is going to be a lot more important. And they're still copying each other's moves. 95, 94.
We have 7 moves in a row where the players are just playing the same moves as the opponent.
That's nuts.
And now I guess pawn to a3 or pawn to a4 will be met by pawn to a6 or pawn to a5, depending. How are we going to break this symmetry?
Yeah, I mean, a3 is interesting because it prepares later on down the line bishop e1 to b4. But that's just a 1-move threat. That's not a dangerous idea. No, David, I mean, he's gotten 0 out of this opening, and he's 2 minutes down on the clock again.
So when does he think, okay, I'm just going to make a draw and we're going to take this to Armageddon?
I don't actually think he's necessarily thinking that at all. You know, I think he's just trying to play the best moves. But if I were him, I would definitely consider offering a draw here at this point, because you're starting to drop quite low on the clock already. And if he overpresses trying to destabilize the position, White could end up being worse here.
Would you say that's a cynicism that's missing from Navara's game? Navara is known as a pretty straight shooter. And wow. Okay, that move is not going to be copied.
Nope. That's going to break the symmetry. Bishop takes c4.
Wow. Navara making the decision that the bishops are not going to be very valuable on this board. I guess he's now then probably going to make a trade with his knight.
Or queen c4.
Okay, because if he, does he now want to prevent black from being able to give up their bishop, corner bishop, for the knight in the center, to kind of keep the symmetry in that respect?
Yeah, if black plays bishop takes c5, I guess we just have basically a draw. So this next move is going to determine a lot about David's approach to this position. Is he okay with a draw? Or is he going to try to keep asymmetry alive at all costs with knight takes c6? Okay.
Yeah, he's playing your move. He's bringing the queen into the game. The queen then had a threat on black's pawn that is protected by the black queen.
Okay, maybe something like a3 now. a3, b4 looks like an interesting plan of expansion on the queen side. He plays it. And do you think Matthias is going to take on e5 with the bishop?
I guess he's not doing that. Does that mean he's
No.
going for the win? Or does it just mean he didn't think it was a big problem?
No, I think he thinks he's better here. And I don't like knight takes e5 because the bishop on h8 is just going to be so out of the game for such a long time. You're going to have to bring it to the game via G7 and F8. But here's the logistical problem. If you play bishop G7 here, there's a slight risk of white taking on D8, and then you have to take with your king. And then it gets a little bit dicey, and now white's threatening bishop B4. So,
And remember, black can castle here.
oh yeah, black can castle here. And he does, and that was his idea. Good catch. Good call. And white cannot castle, obviously, because there's a knight on D1.
Well, you can castle afterwards.
Oh yeah, it's that rule again.
Yeah, we learned a new rule in Fischer Random today, and Navara may need it in this instance. I wonder if he also knows that you're allowed to castle here with the white pieces, despite the black rook pointing down on the king.
Well, he can always try. And the way I think he should set this up is I think he should prioritize castling. So maybe bishop C3, bishop D4 is an idea. But if he wants to castle ASAP, then yeah, he should move his knight away and then just castle and be done with it.
Yeah, but the question is, does he know that white is now allowed to castle?
But he can always try. I mean, you can put your king on the rook and see what happens. There's nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Just don't pull a Donchenko and play king B1 here or whatever,
Yeah.
or like something like that. Position remains very locked up. I think a draw is still super high probability here. What do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely draw the most likely. But if I were to prefer anyone, it would be black, I think, because I do value the bishops more than anything. I will agree that the bishop in the corner is really struggling to get back into play. But yeah, I still like the long term.
No, I agree. Bishop G7, bishop F8 eventually is going to happen. Yeah, I think David should castle queenside if he knows it's legal and trade rooks and, start the Armageddon game. I just don't see. Oh, okay.
He's
A4.
going for an attack. He's going for an attack here. That's an ambitious choice.
But A5 is not a threat because of B5.
So if the pawn advances further, then the black pawn will just avoid a trade. White is essentially trying to get rid of this pawn in front of the rook to open up, which is why black in many instances would want to avoid trades with that pawn so that the rook stays here, not really doing anything. And right. I think this move indicates that Navara does not know that he can castle, because he's trying to find different ways of activating his rook. I don't think he's doing this to go for the win. I think he's doing this because he doesn't realize he's allowed to put the rook to the other side.
Yeah,
because
that's a very interesting theory.
Yeah, in normal chess, when your rook is pointing to the D1 square, the king is not allowed to castle queenside because the king then has to traverse that square. But because here the king does not have to move over a square protected by the opponent, that's a special situation in which castling is allowed. I don't think it's even dawning on him to try to castle. I think in his mind, the option is just not there. And if he doesn't castle here, he's going to be in big trouble, I think.
No, your theory makes a lot of sense. But it also, if you actually put your mind to it and you think about it logically, then, it makes sense that you can castle. But the same situation in real chess would never occur because the king would be on E1. So if the rook is cutting off the D file, then that automatically means you cannot castle. And I think that's what he's confusing it with. Rook D5 by Bluebaum looks like a great move, centralizing the rook. That rook is on a swivel. It can play rook C5. A5 can be met with B5 or even bishop B5. I mean, yeah, if he doesn't castle this game, then then he's potentially in some trouble.
Wow. Imagine this is decided on a player not being familiar
knowing the
enough with the
rules.
rules. Oh my gosh. Poor
What a story that
David.
would be.
Yeah. He's going to be finding that rule book and studying it like crazy for the next World Championship.
Right. I think if he's not castling, the knight d1 should be considered here as a way of improving the knight. Knight d1 and knight c3.
Going after the rook.
There's, of course, a check on a6, but it does absolutely nothing. Queen a6 and b8. But white should keep track of this check, just in case. Like, if the knight's on c3, then queen a6, knight b5 becomes a possibility.
Ah, yes. And why is black not doing anything to get the bishop into play?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think he's prioritized other things, but on the next move, I would say bishop g7 makes probably the most sense out of all of black's improving moves.
Wow. I can't help shake the feeling that Navara would have castled already if he knew he was allowed to. And
B4.
wow, b4. That is quite the move.
I think I get it.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's just making space for his king, right? And he's also taking control of the c5 square so that the rook cannot go there.
And now if he goes knight d1, knight c3, the rook is going to be forced to move back from d5. And guess what? A checkmating attack is not out of the question. When the knight lands on c3, white can already push the a pawn up to a5, and black will not be able to respond with b5. So I love the idea of knight d1 here.
But where is Bluebaum? He could have traded this bishop already. He saw how Navara prioritized.
No, that's
wow.
What is h4? That's way too slow. Very strange. And Navara has taken a completely placid approach, and I think knight d1 would have yielded a excellent attacking chances.
And we also saw the eval bar reacting. It was growing fond of white's position with this plan of just getting an attack on the queen side. Navara now moving his king up. He's just focused on playing the move a5 and then rook to d1. He's just going for the draw at this stage.
Yeah, he's not thinking about attacking. And you were absolutely right. He actually played b4 in order to create a Luft square for the king, not in order to play a5 and checkmate Bluebaum. But I'm surprised. I mean, Navara's super attacking player. This seems like a very sort of milquetoast way to continue.
And Navara down 4 minutes on the clock. Not only might he not win this game, he might lose it on when he gets low on time.
Yeah, no, certainly. This is still very much a game. Now, Bluebaum taking some time here. Bishop f8, I think is on tap, but you can also move the queen back. I mean, there's a lot of little small moves that you can make here.
Small improvements of the position. This is potentially the final game of the Fischer Random World Championship qualifier. Danya was giving us the numbers for the minimum prize for the championship proper in Reykjavik, Iceland, starting October 25th, and the minimum prize is $20,000, which means that is also the stakes in this matchup. The winner of this game will be going to Iceland. Right now, it's looking like it might be a draw, in which case we will need to have another game as a tiebreaker. But yeah, both players spending a lot of time on the initial 17 moves here, showcasing how important this game is to them.
These formats are brutal. The loser of this game is going to be in such pain. The loser of this match, rather, having gone this far and missed out on qualification by just an inch. By the way, bishop takes a4. Don't miss the tactic here. Yeah, that is a devilish threat.
Yeah, big trap here from Bluebaum. It looks as though he's focusing on controlling the open file, but really what has changed here compared to earlier?
Wait, why
Is
couldn't he
that
have taken here?
good question?
I just realized. Oh, Queen A6, B5, and C4. I think.
Okay, so
This is a very, very high
there
level trap.
there's a lot of trickery under the surface. This was our suggestion, but then the computer engine is probably saying that there's some crazy sacrifice. No, so there's something going on here that the eval bar reacted to. I also agree with you, Danya. I thought this move was necessary to prepare bishop takes a4. At the very least, that threat has now been prevented by David Navara
Yeah,
moving
he
his
parries
queen back. But on the other hand, now white is just moving their pieces back while black has taken complete control of the open file in the center. I'm surprised that the eval bar is not celebrating more on black's behalf. To me, it looks like black has excellent chances to win this game, and that's even before we take into consideration that David Navara with the white pieces, he's down 3 minutes on the clock.
Yeah. Well, the good thing for Navara is that the key squares along the D file are protected. The knight on F2 may look like a very lame piece, but it's protecting D1. The bishop is protecting D2. So black has no infiltration squares as of this present moment. Now, if I'm Bluebaum, I would consider king A8 here to get the king off of the B file so that if white, by the way, if white parks a bishop on D4, that loses to rook takes D4. So, you know, Bluebaum doesn't have anything super specific here, but he can continue improving his position. Maybe even H6, G5 can be considered.
Well, does Navara even have a move here?
Yeah, it ain't easy. And it's easy to blunder. I mean, bishop D4 is a very easy move to make here.
If the bishop moves up in the center, that bishop will be captured by the rook. The queen then coming in behind, getting the attack on the king and on the knight. That would be the end of the game. Navara instead moving his queen forward, and that is also a blunder indicated by the eval bar. Bishop takes e4, a4. He saw that threat earlier, and now he's allowing it. And I guess he's allowing it thinking that when this pawn comes off the board, the white queen and rook will work together in towards the black king. But that is not the case. The black pawn can come up,
takes C6, no?
protect the bishop, and everything is under control.
No, but queen takes C6 here?
Oh.
And does black play like C5 or something?
I didn't even see that move.
I think actually...
maybe?
Oh, wow. B takes A5. I mean, it gets super sharp. Bluebaum has to calculate this.
Bluebaum actually calculated and decided not to go for it.
Yeah, I get it.
Bluebaum plays queen to C8.
And now it's finally a threat.
Yeah. So Bluebaum taking control of those squares we were concerned about. The white queen literally using both of them in the variation we just analyzed. Now that is no longer an option. Now bishop takes A4 is on the table. Navara then will have to retreat his queen to where it came from. And that's kind of saying something about white's position, having nothing better than just moving back and forth. And the plan Danya mentioned earlier, with the pawns just trying to make a breakthrough on the opposite side, that's going to be Bluebaum's strategy.
Ooh, bishop E1. And now bishop takes A4 is going to be met, I believe, with queen C4 to A2. Look at that arrangement. And B5, C4. Breaking through the A file. And black is in trouble here. With C takes B5 coming next.
The problem then being the bishop loses its protection. And if the bishop moves away, it is checkmate along that side flank. Okay, but a trap like that is not going to be missed by Bluebaum.
No.
Bluebaum now going to play this move H6, just improving the situation. And yeah, Navara just doesn't really have anything to do.
No, I think a draw is still the likeliest result. I mean, you could get into a situation where neither player is willing to, especially not black. I mean, Bluebaum is not somebody to take crazy risk in general.
Oh, but actually, knight d1 is a threat now because that knight will just come in and attack.
And then a5 again. And then maybe white can resort back to that old plan of pushing the a pawn eventually.
Yeah, so actually, I think Bluebaum now should move his queen back and offer a repetition of moves just to make sure you're having the queen and rook controlling the d1 square, making sure the knight cannot go back. And that is precisely what Bluebaum does.
Exactly what he did.
Navara now going to move his bishop back, thinking that, oh, the guy is offering to make a draw by going back and forth. But that is not what's happening at all. Remember, everyone, that after bishop to c3, there was this opportunity where the computer engines felt like it would be winning for black if you capture the pawn on the side of the board. And where we were trying to study what happens here as the queen comes in. And we're not going to get a repeat of that opportunity because after the queen d8 move, Navara instead chooses to retreat his queen, and now Navara actually got his pieces sorted out a little bit. The only concern now is the continuous pressure from the bishop on the a4 pawn. But for instance, if the white king now can step up, protect that pawn, then finally Navara can get his rook into the middle and make a trade.
At last. But okay, so what do you think about, so c4 here is incredibly committal, but it does force the rook back to d7.
Yeah.
And Navara, what did he do? He made a move. Oh no, Bluebaum plays queen c8.
Wow. Bluebaum effectively offering a draw, but I don't really see Navara. Well, Navara is way down on time, so he definitely wants the draw. I'm just not sure moving the queen back is the optimal way of getting the draw.
No, Bluebaum is playing.
Yeah, that queen was so much better placed on e2. So Navara went back thinking that, oh, I really want to draw. And then Bluebaum says, no, I'm not giving you a draw. You're way down on time.
And you're worse, and I'm basically playing without risk. And, you know, Bluebaum senses that this is as good of a chance as any. I mean, Navara under 2 minutes in a pretty shoddy position. So if Bluebaum's not going to seize this opportunity, then, you know, it begs the question, well, what opportunities are you looking for?
And Navara not really increasing confidence in his position, was spending more than half a minute when he only had 2 minutes left. He's just giving away all his time. But he does play this knight d1 move we have been advocating for some time. I mean,
bishop a4, knight c3, by the way.
Yeah. So knight c3 now. I mean, we could easily see a Navara win here as well.
Oh,
with the knight now coming in.
With pieces on the board, it's a complete 3-result game. And you could easily see Bluebaum taking, 3 minutes here, just trying to figure something out. And overpressing. I mean, blundering e6 pawn, the a6 pawn. Black is far from being totally out of the woods and playing without any risk at all.
Yeah. And like Bluebaum might take this pawn on the side of the board. And then, the complications would ensue with the knight coming in, attacking both the rook and the bishop. I genuinely don't really understand what's going on here. The bishop can move, attack the queen. The queen can step back, have that pressure along the A file, while the knight is still pressuring both the rook and the bishop. Like, this is a tremendously complicated situation. And Bluebaum choosing not to capture, he instead pushes forward, attacking the white queen. And after the trade, he uses his rook to recapture.
Stopping knight c3.
That's a very important point from Danya. Knight c3 no longer available, because then the rook can come in, capturing, attacking both the queen and king, because the knight is blocking the bishop's protection of the white pawn. So, still Bluebaum definitely the favored player in this game. His bishops have placed themselves well to point in towards the white queen side. But on the other hand, now, if Navara does manage to get his knight into play, then he's going to have some pretty juicy attacking targets.
Yeah, imagine if he gets his knight to c5 and he causes the trade of the dark squared bishop for the knight. He's going to have great control over the dark squares, but Bluebaum with a huge move, c7, c5, and now I find it very hard to believe that this game is going to end in a draw. Although maybe it might. Knight c3 by Navara, rook takes b4, queen takes a6, and then we're going to see a trade of queens, and we're going to see a fascinating, unbalanced endgame as a result of that.
Wow. And both players being very low on time. Navara under a minute. Bluebaum not much better with 2 minutes on the clock and counting, because he's not even capturing the white pawn. He wants to keep the queens on the board, and that is a great decision
Phenomenal.
from Bluebaum.
30 seconds for Navara in a super complicated middle game. Bluebaum threatens to take the pawn on b4. And if Navara takes on c5 and Bluebaum recaptures the bishop, that threatens two different discoveries. Bishop a3 check and bishop takes e3. You can sense the concern here. David Navara has backed himself into a huge corner. How is he going to get out of this 15 seconds?
And one of the reasons that's such a big problem is that the white queen is undefended behind the black bishop.
Oh my God. Knight a4 with this, just the last seconds here.
Knight a4 attacking the rook. I mean, if the rook has to move, the knight can capture the black pawn, and then you get rid of black's bishop pair, so that should probably be fine. But what if black just cashes in? Yeah, black can just cash in, capture that knight, capture the pawn afterwards, and then we'll have an endgame where black is just up a pawn.
And white permanently with 8 seconds. I mean, try defending this with no time on the clock, and Bluebaum very understandably goes precisely for this endgame.
This could be the last couple of moves of this qualifier, though I'm not sure how Bluebaum is going to win this.
Yeah.
The computer being very confident. I am anything but. The white king is about to come up the board, put pressure on that b4 pawn. It's not clear how black is going to proceed here. The king will come up, and then the black king will come.
Yeah, but Navara, he saved that position down a piece. And we know what his defensive capabilities are, but bishop c5, he's going to take out the pawn on e3. And look at those kingside pawns. He's just going to vacuum all of them up. This is completely winning. This is completely winning for Matthias. Bishop f2. Bishop f2, it's essentially over.
The pawn pushing forward. The pawn is trying to get up there, and then the rook will try to get an attack.
I think even e3 should be easy.
Yeah, e3. The pawn is just queening.
e2.
Bluebaum is winning it. Bluebaum is going to Reykjavik, Iceland. He has won the most important game of his career, getting him a huge prize fund win here, because there's nothing Navara can do now to stop the pawn from becoming a new queen. And Bluebaum takes home this victory.
It's all over. What a finale there for Matthias. And you could sense it from the very opening. David just not effective in the opening this game, which was a marked departure from his opening success in previous games. He took a little bit too long in the middle game, and Matthias, excellent decision to keep pieces on the board and to decline the draw on several different occasions. Nerves of steel for the German Grandmaster, and a very deserving victory.
We're going to be taking a break, but after the break, we will have an interview with the winner. And before the break, we want to remind you that the Women's Speed Chess Championship is coming up this week. It's Katarina Lagno taking on the reigning champion, Hu Yifan, this Friday, September 2nd at 4 a.m. Pacific. You better call into work sick right now, You don't want to miss this clash of titans over the board on Friday. So we'll take a quick break from this qualifier for the Fischer Random World Championship. And when we're back, we're going to have an interview with our winner, Matthias Bluebaum of Germany.
Welcome back to the World Fischer Random Chess Championship. We are here with the winner of the second qualifier. Grandmaster Matthias Bluebaum is going to Reykjavik. Matthias, first of all, congratulations. You played amazing. Can you start by sharing your overall thoughts on how you played today against David?
Yeah, today I really wasn't sure. I mean, some games were decent and some games, I mean, especially the third game, I felt like I played like a complete idiot and that was much worse. The other games, I guess, were fine, but I really wasn't sure. Like all the games were close and completely thought out, so I had no clue.
You had a frustrating second game where David put together some heroic resistance. How do you mentally recover as quickly as you did and avoid tilting in the third and fourth games?
Actually, I think I'm pretty bad at avoiding tilting, but okay, at least there was like a 6-minute break between games 2 and 3, and okay, I mean, I just had to play it. Also, my third game was pretty bad, so I'm not sure if I managed to avoid tilting there.
Well, the fourth game was very impressive, and at several junctures, you avoided the unspoken draw offer from David. We have a couple of really good questions from the chat. Grandpa Simpson asks you, how close are you, Matthias, to taking the draw and getting into the Armageddon in game 4?
I mean, at first I was fine with the draw, but at some point he was just always lower on time for a few minutes, and I thought my position is not that risky at least, so I just felt like I should keep it going because Armageddon is just basically pure luck at some point, so I saw no reason to take the draw.
Another great question from Steve is 5. Matthias, you faced Magnus Carlsen in the previous title Tuesday. What was that like, and how excited are you to face Magnus in Reykjavik?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to play him. Of course, I lost, and he just completely crushed me with first b4, so it wasn't the best experience in the world. But yeah, it's nice to play against these players. Yeah, so it's always nice.
We'll be excited to see you in Reykjavik. Jon Ludwig, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and one of the things I'm wondering is how do you prepare for a Fischer Random Championship when you don't know how the pieces are going to be placed as you start? Did you have a special strategy going into this final?
To be very honest, I just didn't prepare at all. I mean, there are no openings to prepare, so I just felt like I should rest and sleep, and that's basically it. Like, I didn't know what to prepare otherwise, like just play chess. Yeah.
Do you have a special strategy for what pieces you're looking out for to kind of in the starting position, how you want to place your pieces?
I'm never really sure what's my plan with the pieces. I mean, usually you try to get the center or something at least and open the bishops or something, but it's like always a bit random.
Mm-hmm.
And one final question about the rules of Fischer Random, because Danya and I noticed, well, we have the benefit of in the analysis board, we can test out moves. And one of the moves we tested out was that David could castle in that fourth game instead of pushing the pawn up to a4. Were you aware that the rules allow white to castle despite your rook controlling the d1 square?
I was actually expecting him to long castle. I mean, a4 was a very risky move, but I mean, at least he was clearly showing that he wanted to play for more, I felt, with a4, because otherwise long castles and we exchange rooks and probably the game is a draw. And I expected that move, to be honest. I wasn't like 100% sure it's possible, but like 99, and I thought he would play it.
But do you think the reason he didn't play it was because he was going for the win, or because he wasn't aware of that even being an option?
I'm not completely sure. I felt he was playing for a win at that point, because I wasn't sure about my move b6. It gave him a target on the queen side, so I don't know. I guess he was trying to win.
But he didn't succeed in the end, and the winner of this Fischer Random World Championship qualifier is Matthias Bluebaum. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Matthias.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for popping in for the interview, and good luck in Reykjavik.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, there's that final bracket, Jon Ludwig. What an impressive journey for the German Grandmaster as he defeats David Navara in the final. And of course, Alexei Sarana in the semifinal. That was a barn burner in its own right.
Yeah, no, it was close till the end. but when it mattered the most, in the final game of the final, he managed to eke out a win, and the reward is plentiful in return. And that means for the Reykjavik event, the championship itself, we now have an updated list of players. The world champion Wesley So will be there. The 2019 runner-up Magnus Carlsen will be there. The player, the number one player from Iceland, Jörvar Gretarsson, he will be there. But now we have not only one, but two qualifiers from Chess.com's events. It's Grandmaster Fedoseev and Grandmaster Bluebaum.
Yeah, that's going to be a phenomenal addition to the overall field. I mean, of course, Wesley is probably the favorite as the incredibly strong reigning Fischer Random World Champion, but Magnus Carlsen is going to try to send a message. I'm very excited, and that World Championship is coming your way at the end of October 25th through the 30th in Reykjavik, Iceland.
Okay, and that means we're done for today. Thank you, everyone, for watching this qualifier for the Fischer Random World Championship. I've been Jon Ludvig Hammer. Danya joined me when he got out of bed. And we hope you enjoyed the games. We certainly did. And have a nice day.